Do you know that feeling where the air just feels too thick to breathe, even when it's freezing out? Like the atmosphere itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to trip up. That's how it started. My name's Silvester Winchester, and before you ask, no relation to the guys on TV, though I've seen enough weirdness in my time as a patrol officer back in Ohio to fill a few seasons. I'm telling you this because if I don't get it out, it's going to rot inside me. My family, my wife, Sarah, and our girl, they think I just had a rough time at a remote cabin, maybe a bit of woods madness from the isolation. But they weren't there in the Maine interior last January. They didn't see the way the shadows moved. I'd taken a month of leave. Policing wears on you. It's a constant diet of everyone else's worst days. I needed a reset, so I rented a cabin near the edge of the North Maine woods, about a 5-hour haul from the coast. It was supposed to be a place to focus on my hobby, building high-end, water-cooled PC rigs. I brought crates worth of components, 1490s, custom loop fittings, the works. There's something meditative about the precision of it, you know? Soldering and cable management don't talk back, and they don't bleed. The town nearest to me was a place called Olamon. It's one of those spots that feels like it's being slowly swallowed by the pines. When I stopped for supplies, the locals didn't give me the warm welcome routine. They gave me that look you give a guy walking toward a ledge. "Staying up on the ridge?" the clerk asked, his eyes lingering on my Ohio plates. When I nodded, he just muttered something about keeping my doors bolted. "The snow hides the size of the things," he'd said. I laughed it off at the time. I had my service weapon, a 6-hour P320, and the Remington 700 for predators. I thought I was the apex. The first few days were deceptively calm. The weather was eerily still. No wind, just a heavy, white blanket that muffled every sound. It's the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I spent my nights under the glow of LED desk lamps, assembling a motherboard. But on the fourth night, the silence broke. It wasn't a crack or a bang. It was a whistle, a high, oscillating pitch that sounded almost human, but with a lung capacity that no man could possess. It echoed through the valley, vibrating the very glass of my cabin windows. I went to the window, hand instinctively moving toward the holster on the chair. Outside, the floodlights hit the tree line. The snow was pristine, except for one thing. About 50 yards out, standing just beyond the reach of the light, was a vertical shape. It was too thick to be a tree and too tall to be a moose. He just stood there, a void against the grey-white woods. And then it blinked. Not a horizontal blink, but a heavy, animal shutter of eyes that caught the light with a dull, amber eye shine. My heart didn't just race, it hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I faced armed suspects in dark alleys, but this felt like looking at a ghost made of muscle. I remember those late-night YouTube deep dives, the alleged footage, the blurry blobs in the brush. You watch those and think, why didn't they just stay calm? But when you're there, and the air smells suddenly of wet dog and old copper, your brain screams at you to run. The creature didn't move for 3 minutes. Neither did I. Then it let out a low, guttural huff, like a bellows, and simply stepped back into the dark. The sheer fluidity of it, 7, maybe 8 feet of mass moving without a sound, that's what broke my confidence. I realized then that I wasn't in a cabin, I was in a cage. Sleep didn't come that night, or the night after. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that amber eyeshine burning through the lids. I tried to distract myself with the PC build, but my hands were shaking too much to seat the CPU. One bent pin and the whole thing would be junk, kind of like me if I didn't get my head straight. I told myself it was just a stray bear, maybe one with mange that made it look off, but the way it had stood upright, that wasn't a bear. Bears don't whistle back at you. By the 6th day, the calm weather turned into a psychological weapon. There was no wind to rustle the branches, meaning every snap of a twig outside sounded like a gunshot. I decided to head into Alaman to grab more salt for the porch and maybe a bit of human conversation to tether me to reality. But when I got to my truck, I stopped dead. The heavy steel tailgate of my Ford was dented, not from a collision but pinched. There were 4 distinct indentations in the metal, like giant finger marks where something had simply gripped the truck and tried to lift it. I looked down on the snow. There they were, massive 5-toed prints, nearly 18 inches long, sunk deep into the packed powder. They circled the truck, then led straight toward the cabin's crawl space. My stomach did a slow, nauseating roll. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was touching my things. It was establishing a perimeter. I'm a cop. I know how predators work. They test the fence before they jump in. I didn't go to town. I went inside, grabbed my Remington 700 and loaded it with 30-06 Springfield rounds. If this thing wanted to play, I was going to change the rules of the game. I spent the afternoon boarding up the lower windows with plywood I found in the shed, my ears straining for that whistle. That's when the towing really started. Around 4 p.m., just as the sun started to dip, a rock the size of a grapefruit slammed into the side of the cabin. Thump. Then another one hit the roof. They weren't trying to break in. Not yet. It was like they were checking my reaction time. I stepped onto the porch, rifle leveled, and yelled into the trees. "I see you. Get the hell out of here." My voice felt thin and fragile against the vastness of the Maine woods. In response, a branch, a thick, healthy pine limb, snapped in the distance with a sound like a bone breaking. Then, the wood knocking began. It moved from the left of the clearing to the right, too fast for one creature. My heart went cold. There wasn't just one. I retreated inside and locked the deadbolt, feeling the inadequacy of the wood and glass. I remembered a YouTube video from a hunter in the Cascades who talked about infrasound, a low-frequency noise these things supposedly emit to paralyze prey. Suddenly, a wave of intense nausea hit me, accompanied by a pressure in my chest that made me want to weep. I slumped against the door, clutching my rifle. Outside, I heard a heavy, rhythmic thudding, the sound of something massive walking up the porch steps. It stopped right in front of the door. I could hear it breathing, a wet, raspy sound, like a man with pneumonia. Then, The doorknob slowly, deliberately began to turn. The knob groaned under a pressure that shouldn't have been possible for a hand of any size. I stood there, frozen, my finger trembling against the trigger guard of the Remington. I stared down the barrel of a Saturday night special in a Cincinnati basement, but that door handle turning felt like a sentence being signed. The door didn't give, thanks to the heavy-duty deadbolt I'd reinforced the day I arrived, but I heard a low, frustrated rumble from the other side, a sound so deep it vibrated in my molars. Then, silence returned, sharper and more terrifying than the noise. I didn't move for an hour, watching the plywood-covered windows as if I could see through the wood. I realized my vacation had turned into a tactical standoff. I needed light, more than just the cabin's flickering bulbs. I remembered my PC gear, specifically the high-lumen LED strips and the industrial-grade power supply I'd brought for the rig. In a frantic blur of motion, I began stripping wires and taping the ultra-bright strips to the exterior window sills through the gaps in the plywood. I rigged them to a spare battery backup system. If they cut the main power, I wouldn't be left in the dark. Around midnight, the temperature plummeted, and the calm weather finally broke into a biting, localized wind. That's when the screaming started. It wasn't a whistle anymore. It was a vocalization that moved from a woman's shriek to a primate's roar in a single breath. It came from the roof. The shingles groaned under massive weight, and I heard the distinct sound of the chimney masonry being gripped and shaken. They were trying to peel the roof off like a tin can. I scrambled to the center of the room, aiming the rifle upward. Suddenly the power lines outside snapped with a shower of blue sparks. I heard the transformer on the pole pop. The cabin plunged into darkness, but my battery backup kicked in. The LED strips I'd rigged outside flared to life, bathing the snow in a blinding synthetic white. Through a crack in the plywood, I saw it. No, I saw them. Two of them were on the ground, hunched like massive linebackers, their fur matted with ice and frozen mud. A third was clinging to the porch pillar, its elongated arms wrapped halfway around the timber. The one on the pillar turned its head toward the light. His face wasn't quite an ape's and wasn't quite a man's. It was a rugged, weathered mask of ancient intelligence and predatory malice. It bared teeth that were flat like ours but twice as large, stained yellow. It didn't flinch at the light. It seemed curious, almost insulted by it. One of the creatures on the ground picked up a heavy, decorative stump from the yard and hurled it. The wood shattered against the cabin wall, inches from my head. This wasn't just hunting. This was a coordinated assault. I knew then that if I stayed until morning, there wouldn't be enough of me left for a closed casket funeral. Panic is a luxury I couldn't afford, so I fell back on my training. Assess, move, survive. The creatures were rotating around the cabin, their heavy footfalls creating a rhythmic thumping that felt like a countdown. I knew my fort was about 30 feet from the porch, but in that snow, with those things, 30 feet might as well have been 30 miles. I grabbed my tactical bag, stuffing it with my extra magazines, and, oddly enough, a pressurized canister of coolant from my PC building kit. Pure fluorocarbon. It wasn't a flashbang, but it was a distraction. I waited for the sound of the creature on the roof to shift toward the back of the cabin. In one fluid motion, I kicked the front door open and threw the coolant canister toward the tree line, while simultaneously firing a round from the Remington into the air. The deafening crack of the rifle and the hiss of the escaping gas created a momentary vacuum of sound. I didn't look back. I lunged for the truck, my boots churning through the deep, frozen crust of the Maine snow. I heard a roar behind me, not of pain, but of pure, unadulterated fury. I reached the driver's side just as the largest of the three rounded the corner of the cabin. It was moving on all fours, a terrifying loping gallop that covered ground faster than any human could sprint. I fumbled the keys, my gloved fingers slick with sweat, and dived into the cab. As I slammed the door, a massive hand, gray-skinned and covered in coarse black hair, slammed against the window. The safety glass spider-webbed instantly, but it held. I cranked the engine. The cold start groan felt like it took a lifetime before the V8 roared to life. I threw the truck into reverse, flooring it. The creature on the side of the truck didn't let go. It gripped the side mirror, ripping the entire assembly of the door like it was made of balsa wood. I shifted into drive and barreled down the unplowed driveway, the truck fishtailing wildly. In the rearview mirror, bathed in the red glow of my tail lights, I saw them standing in the middle of the road. They didn't chase, they just stood there, three dark monoliths against the white world, watching me go. One of them raised its hand, a gesture that looked hauntingly like a wave, or perhaps a warning. I didn't stop until I hit the paved lights of a gas station 3 towns over. I sat there in the heated cab, shaking so hard I couldn't even hold my ID when the local deputy eventually pulled up to check on the crazed driver in the parking lot. I never went back for the PC parts, the tools, or the rest of my gear. I told the rental agency there was a gas leak and a fire. I didn't care about the deposit. People ask me why I don't go hunting anymore, or why I keep every light in my house on until sunrise. It's because I know that out there, in the quiet places of the world, there are things that whistle in the dark, and the worst part isn't that they are monsters, it's that they are smart enough to let you know they're choosing to let you live.